Well, no Terry Ford for this show yet. That starts next Monday. But for the last time, I'm Elijah Campbell with you here on the Postgame Show. Excited for the show we have today. Of course, I couldn't wrap up a final postgame show without having our friend Langston Moore to talk some football here in this hour. He'll join us in the next segment, and he'll join us for about 2 segments or so to talk about the latest going on in not just the college football offseason, but the NFL offseason, because I'm really curious to hear what his thoughts are on that Jalen Ramsey trade, and really, does that make the Pittsburgh Steelers much better for this season? We'll get Langston's thoughts as somebody who used to be a divisional rival of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Michael Saul is going to join us in the 4 o'clock hour at 4:30. He's going to hop on the show and talk about the article he wrote today, a really good story on Jason Brown, former South Carolina quarterback. He caught up with him and talked about what maybe his biggest regret was, and we can kind of revisit a little bit that first year of the Shane Beamer era where he was really having to piece together a team and kind of figure a lot of things out and really overachieved with a team that not a lot of people had any expectation of in 2021. So excited to get into that as well. And a start bench drop today, and we'll go get into that in the first segment. And this was one that I try to get creative with. Yesterday was a lot of fun, a lot of real fun participation with the SEC quarterback / Heisman winner / national champion between Cam Newton, Joe Burrow, and Tim Tebow. Today, I wanted to get non-quarterback specific, and maybe guys that didn't win Heismans that should have. So for today's start bench drop, 3 of my favorite college football players of all time, they're not quarterbacks, and I firmly believe that they should have won Heisman trophies. Starting, I'll do the Jay Phillips thing and do this in alphabetical order by last name here. Larry Fitzgerald, former Pittsburgh wide receiver, finished second in Heisman voting to Jason White, which, by the way, still not over that. I don't hold grudges. I'm not a person that will hold grudges and be mad about something for a long period of time, but I am when it comes to Larry Fitzgerald getting robbed of the 2003 Heisman. Jason White, good quarterback at Oklahoma, but it was one of those years of, hey, let's just give it to the quarterback of the best team. Who's the quarterback for the best team? Oh, Oklahoma's number 1. Who's their quarterback? Jason White? Okay, yeah, sure. We'll vote him to win the Heisman. But Larry Fitzgerald was the best player in college football that year. I was 8 years old when that happened, and I was so mad about that, and I'm still mad about that to this day. Not a lot of things that at age 8 that bothered me, that still bother me today. That is definitely one of them. Number 2, Adrian Peterson. Outside of Herschel Walker's freshman year at Georgia, maybe the best freshman year of any running back in the history of college football. He had some phenomenal numbers. I'll get into some of that in just a little bit. And lastly, Ndamukong Suh from Nebraska, the one defensive player on this list. So when I asked Langston Moore what his preferences are for this thought exercise here, I have a theory that the defensive lineman camaraderie here is going to continue and that he might either start or just bench him. But Ndamukong Suh didn't just have one of the best individual defensive seasons in the history of college football. He was a one-man wrecking crew on that Nebraska defensive line. He still has, in my opinion, is one of the best individual defensive games in college football history in that 2009 Big 12 championship where Nebraska took on Texas. Texas won that game 13-12, so obviously a low-scoring game, so they could get to the national championship game where they have lost to eventual national champion Alabama. But, man, in that game, I still remember it. I mean, 12 tackles, 4.5 sacks for somebody who's an interior defensive lineman. I'm sure Colt McCoy still has nightmares of seeing Ndamukong Suh. And Suh was one of the 4 Heisman finalists that was in New York, and I'm surprised that we saw any of Colt McCoy because I didn't know if there was much of Colt McCoy left. Because that was one of the, again, 4.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss in that game too. Ndamukong Suh ate Colt McCoy, consumed him, like physically consumed that man in that game. But for that entire year too, 12 sacks, 50 tackles for loss. To this day, thought he should have gotten more Heisman consideration. And when doing all the research for this too, forgot to mention this with Adrian Peterson. I love doing exercises like this because when I talk about it on air, I want to have some backup to what I ultimately do in terms of who I'm starting, benching, and dropping. But I love learning things about these individual seasons that might have just been overlooked, like especially for something like Adrian Peterson, right? I was very, very young for his, I think it was maybe 9 years old for his freshman season, where he ran for almost 2,000 yards that year. But you find a couple of tidbits that are just absolutely mind-blowing. And Adrian Peterson, to his credit, taught me something today in terms of what his dominance was at the collegiate level. The dude ran for, obviously, 1,900 yards his freshman year. That was good for 148 yards a game. How many true freshmen in college football come in right away in their average game in their first season is 148 yards? It was ridiculous. And, of course, he went on to have a pro career that was legendary. Honestly, if you want to rank NFL running backs outside of Derrick Henry in my era, so like the era I started watching football in the early 2000s all the way up until now, Adrian Peterson is probably the best I've seen. Him and Derrick Henry. It's a 1-2 combination there. But a dude that ran for over 4,000 yards in his career, and for his career, and this includes a junior season at Oklahoma, that was a little disappointing, mostly because of injury. He didn't have a full season. But averaged 130 yards per game for his career. And in 2 different seasons, averaged 140-plus yards a game. One big stat that I thought was just mind-blowing about that freshman year, too, that I didn't realize until kind of going through some game logs today, was as a true freshman, not only did he put up those numbers that are mind-blowing for anyone throughout an entire season, Adrian Peterson had more 200-yard rushing games as a true freshman than games where he rushed for under 100. Unfortunately for Mr. Peterson, one of those games where he rushed for under 100 yards came in the national championship game against Southern Cal, where Southern Cal just beat them over the head with a bag of hammers for 4 quarters, and it wasn't remotely close. But that was one of only 2 games that year where he did not reach the 100-yard benchmark, and in 3 games, he rushed for 200. Another thing that I liked about Adrian Peterson that was stuck out, I love guys that show up when they play their biggest rivals. Now, he ran all over Texas the first meeting, over 200 yards, and that was a legendary performance in itself. But he played Oklahoma State twice. He didn't play his junior year because of injury. But in the 2 games he actually got to play against Oklahoma State, in the Bedlam rivalry, which needs to be brought back, by the way, he put up absurd stat lines. So I took the averages for what his career average is in the Bedlam game, which has to obviously cement his status as one of the greatest Oklahoma Sooners of all time just for this alone. In 2 games against Oklahoma State in his career, he averaged 243 yards a game. And I believe in that first game, he had about 275. Almost ran for 300 yards against the Cowboys. It's absolutely remarkable. And Larry Fitzgerald had a similar effect when it came to playing his best games against his biggest rival. Now, Pittsburgh had a long-time rivalry with West Virginia. The Backyard Brawl, one of the best rivalry game nicknames in the history of college football. But Larry Fitzgerald, who only played 2 seasons at Pitt, averaged in those games 10 catches, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. These dudes shined the brightest when they played their biggest rivals. And Ndamukong Suh just did it for 4 years at Nebraska, where he was phenomenal, and then had the one game that really stood out. And that was a guy, too, that just Nebraska's run defenses were so good. And if you just go through Nebraska's game logs for those years, not a lot of teams were putting up a lot of points against them. Really, the only team in 2009 that did was Mike Leach's Texas Tech team that didn't have to rely on the run game a lot. They put it in the air a whole lot. You don't do that if your nickname is the air raid offense. But that's our start bench drop for today. Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian Peterson, and Ndamukong Suh. Hit us up on our text line, 803-404-6100, our Firehouse Subs text line. It's where I get a majority of these. Or even on our YouTube stream, too, at the Game TV, which, if you don't know by now, then you just haven't been listening very well. But we do have a YouTube channel, and that comment section can go crazy. But I tally every single result, or every single submission. I like to get a good gauge on where everybody's at in terms of answering this. So you can submit that too, and I'll also track it down. But that's it for today. The best college football players that are non-quarterbacks that did not win the Heisman. Those was the three that I came up with today. And also, it's our last show until the 4th of July. So we have some 4th of July themed stuff, and one of which, and it's a question that we put out on our Twitter feed today at 1075 The Game. What is the most underrated 4th of July food? Now, I'll drop mine at the end of this hour, and I put some thought into it in terms of underrated. And I thought of it through the lens of my personal experiences. And it's one of which I hated at the time, but the older I got, the more I liked. So we'll take your submissions on that as well. Start, bench, drop. Coming up here in the next segment, Langston Moore is going to hop on the show. Some big Gamecock news as well. We'll get his thoughts on that. They landed a 4-star recruit, and the last 2 days sitting in this chair, I've had to be the bearer of bad news in terms of losing recruits the last 2 days, in terms of commitments that didn't go South Carolina's way, but not today, my friends. Not today. Today was a big recruiting win for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks on the recruiting trail. We'll take a quick break. We'll get Langston Moore on the show. Last time I get to hang out with him in the 3 to 6 hour. We're going to talk a lot of football, college football, NFL offseason. I think we've had him on once since the NFL draft, but there's been a lot of changes since then. So we'll get Langston's thoughts on a lot of things. His start, bench, drop for today's prompt. His most underrated 4th of July food, and a whole lot more. You're listening to the Postgame Show. On a day where we're talking a lot of football, and with it being our last show before 4th of July, we'll also talk a lot of food. There's probably not a better person to get on the show than friend of the program, Langston Moore. Langston, how are you planning on celebrating the 4th here in a couple days?
By trying to get, it's like the sun, right? I want to be very close, just close enough to the grill where I can enjoy and bask in the heat, but not close enough where I get burned, but not far enough where the meat's cold. So you got to like pit stuff to me across the lawn or something. So I'm going to find a nice, sweet little bounce and maybe a little bit of shade of being just close enough to the grill where I can just reach over. Let me taste that for you. Let me put that back. But not cooking myself. But again, trying to find that right. Equanimity is a nice word. I hang around smart people like Preston Thorne, so I'm trying to find that nice balance of heat, cold, moisture, dryness, but also, it's a long day, man. You got to make it all the way. You got to be eating a hot dog as the sun's going down and the fireworks are going off. You know what I'm saying? So again, maybe the young kids will get on me for saying I ate a hot dog, but the whole point is, man, it's a balance. It's a long day. It's like New Year's, man. You gotta pace yourself.
You do, and that's the thing. Like, as much fun as I'd like to have being the one to be the griller, it's not fun whenever I'm already dripping in sweat because it's so hot outside and I have to stand in front of the grill, and then you're miserable. Then I don't know if I handle that much heat. But before we get into any football, too, most underrated 4th of July food to you?
Most underrated 4th of July food, baked beans. But again, it has to be the baked beans with nice mixture of some ground beef in there. And I've seen they got the nice the dog that talks to your baked beans. They got a vegetarian brand. I don't even think that I don't trust any of that. Plus, it's a talking dog, so who knows what they got going over there? That's Bush's, I think. But baked beans, but hot dogs and baked beans, I think. Because again, man, just the charred. Not all the way Chernobyl hot dog, crusty, burnt, but just, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Little something to make my doctor be like, you know how much carcinogens are in those, right? Like, and that's when you just be like, man, I play football, man. I'll be all right.
Hey, if the Bush's baked beans dog can convince you to do that, which he should, because golden retrievers also can play basketball. I've seen all the Air Bud movies. I know exactly what those dogs are capable of. That actually is the preferred messenger for me. But in terms of football, Langston, it would take a talking golden retriever to talk me into Jalen Ramsey getting traded to the Steelers to be a thing that maybe pushes the Steelers into contention. But they gave up Minkah Fitzpatrick in the process. But they picked up Jonnu Smith, the tight end, very familiar with the work of Arthur Smith. They made some good music together in the Music City playing for the Titans. But when you first saw that, and you saw that the Steelers are getting Ramsey and Smith, but giving up Minkah Fitzpatrick in the process, what was kind of your initial thought on how much this actually benefits the team that you used to have to face twice a year?
I know this is more of an audio medium, but it was just the perfect visual, like the visual medium, like the meme of the person being like, Jalen Ramsey, but then Minkah Fitzpatrick, we have to get, I don't know if it was like too very quickly how things happen. Like, because again, what you know about the Steelers is they're going to play a lot of great defense. They're probably going to have one dude that's probably just going to be a lockdown guy, so you can just go ahead and cut that half of the field off, and you couple that with the defense and the discipline, and then just Mike Tomlin, and then it just being all black uniforms. But like I said early in the year when we were talking about like the Pittsburgh Steelers, like this is an older team. This is
very,
and it feels like, are we going to be started talking about like a group of NFL teams like what we've been talking about like the NBA this year, kind of like the transition of power, because like the stalwarts we've seen over the last few years, it's been the Kansas Cities, it's been this, but like a young team is going to have to pop its head through there. Will it be? I don't think Pittsburgh is going to be one of those young teams because, again, it's just old guys damn near getting their 401k because, again, you can almost be 45 to get your 401k in the NFL. So Aaron Rodgers is right there. There's a couple other guys right there. But it just seems to be like an aging team, older team, doing some things that some other teams in the AFC North would kind of do, like just kind of holding on. And, I'm looking at the Bengals, and it seems like Pittsburgh started to do some of those things. But I will give them the benefit of them being the team that has only had a few head coaches. They kind of seem like they have some competency in their franchise and their management. So until they prove otherwise, and they're trying to prove otherwise with this quarterback and how they've been playing it, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt, but again, it still just feels like Elijah, like it's just gonna be 9-8. It just feels like it's gonna be,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be 10-8. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna go down to Houston and play them in a wild card game and just get our teeth kicked in or something. So with all that being said, it felt like a Steelers move, but then it felt like, oh, we're going in the wrong way. We're just getting older. Mika Fitzpatrick is a guy who, still kind of getting into the prime of his career, but man, I think the Dolphins won that trade there. I think the Dolphins figured out a way to do it, but I will give them the benefit of the doubt. And then when we're talking about the whole AFC North, that black and blue division period, what are we really talking about? Everybody's really just fighting to be behind Lamar Jackson and everybody else out there in Baltimore, because unless, Andy Dalton and the rest of and we can figure out what we're going to do in Cincinnati as far as with defense, we're really all fighting for second place behind the Baltimore Ravens.
That was my thing, too. It's like, I think this makes the Steelers a little better. I think, on offense, just because of the marriage of Johnny Smith and Arthur Smith.
Yep.
If there's anybody in the NFL that knows how to use that guy, and a guy that, an offensive coordinator that runs a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, it's Arthur Smith. And so there's some benefit there, but you're getting Jalen Ramsey in 2025. How good can he be, north of 30 now? And you pair him with Darius Slay, another corner which if this was the cornerback tandem in 2021, then you're like, oh, this is a no-fly zone type secondary. But how good can that really make them? And my first thought was maybe you pass Cincinnati if the Bengals don't, let's say you don't come to terms with Shamar Stewart and that he doesn't develop because of that, and you have an unhappy Trey Hendrickson who's not maybe performing to what his standard has become. I think really maybe the ceiling could just be finishing second in that division.
Yeah, and again, and we're all, no knock on, I can have my opinions about the Cincinnati Bengals and how they run themselves, but they've figured out a way to put some coaching stability over there, past the Marvin Lewis's pass, but not so much where it's just really germane. So they went and got Al Golden. Lou Amaretto-Sao had to get up out of there. A lot of coverage for and all that. Just keep everything inside the front. It worked till it didn't work anymore. And now we went and got Al Golden. So I just want to know, is he going to come out there with the button-up, dress shirt like he was back in Miami?
Is he going to wear the tie?
You fool. What are you trying to prove out here? We're playing in Miami. Again, I respect your daddy and everybody who, man, take that off and put you a nice dry fit on. But all that being said, I think Al Golden will figure out some ways to bring some youthfulness, some excitement. Hopefully a lot of the success that he had over there at Notre Dame, running a lot of stuff that they had the last couple of years. He aged himself by putting the glasses on, kind of looking very much champion at times.
Yep.
But again, we can all agree, Muschamp as a defensive coordinator is probably pretty good. Muschamp as a head coach, so I think it's probably going to be the same thing with Al Golden. Like Al Golden as a defensive coordinator, show me some really good stuff. Al Golden as a head coach, And so again, I think this might work out well for them. And again, get the jump on folks before they figure out what they're going on scheme-wise. Totally, vastly different. But are they going to get the production out of Trey Hendricks? Are they going to get the productions out of everybody else? And on top of everything, like we said, what's Andy Dalton going to do? As Andy Dalton goes, this is how this team goes. Let's just be honest about that.
Yeah, I mean, like that Bengals team always is going to have a really high floor, because when Joe Burrow's tossing the ball to Jamar Chase, I like your offense, right? Regardless. Yeah. And T. Higgins is healthy for 85% of the season. Then I like what your floor can be, but the defense is really going to define the ceiling there for Cincinnati. But Langston, yesterday we had a pretty good start bench drop. Today I kind of mixed it up a little bit. So I want your take on this. So we're starting, benching, dropping. Three of the guys were some of my favorite players that are non-quarterbacks that did not win the Heisman, between Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian Peterson, and Ndamukong Suh, strictly college careers.
Okay. And we're very, very intriguing, very intriguing. So do you want the answer now, start, bench, drop?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is going to be tough, because I played with this dude, and he was everything that as advertised, Larry Fitzgerald, and then on top of that, we had another dude named Anquan Bolden, just to see iron sharpening iron, and on top of just Denny Green being an offensive dude out there just pressing the Nintendo button all day, just in practice, just drop the bombs, Trent. Just keep dropping the bombs, Kurt, on him. We can't be stopped, and that's okay. So to answer this, I'm going to say we're going to start Adrian Peterson, because again, fighting in the streets, not to the side, don't hold that against him, all of those different things. He was and I have a vision. I have a picture in my mind of Minnesota in that, and just hearing that Viking chant all day. But we're talking strictly about Oklahoma. I start him.
Okay.
I bench Larry Fitzgerald, and I just, again, Sue, love him. A lot of people have to probably be like, man, what's wrong with you? Like, Sue, he's a crazy. Yes, I played kind of, and I wish I could get away with half of the stuff that he did and still walk around here with that kind of teddy bear smile, but that dude is crazy, man. So I probably have to cut him. So start AP, bench Larry Fitzgerald. We're going to cut Ndamukong Suh.
The Adrian Peterson thing is so wild to me because, I mean, I remember his freshman year being really good. That was the breakout and firmly believing he was one of the best players in college football. Lost out the Heisman to Matt Leinart, and it's hard to argue against somebody who had, some of the numbers that Matt Leinart did with the team that he had, especially when they absolutely gave Oklahoma the business in that national title game. But how many players, a true freshman, Langston, do you think we're ever going to see again come into college football and rush for almost 2,000 yards and have an average of 140 plus yards a game? I don't know if we see that again.
Yeah, I don't think we see. We might see seasons of those, like a guy in the junior year, like who's that guy? But like coming out of high school, this is the dude. And then you go to the program where we're gonna run the rock, we're gonna spread it, but you're gonna be the dude. And then you got here and you were the dude. And then through the season, and that's usually kind of how the cycle of things go. Whether you're a rookie quarterback or a freshman or whatever, like the first 3-4 games of the season, you kind of might surprise some folks. Then they kind of figure out what you are in kind of the middle of the season. Then at the end of the year, it's a battle of have you gotten better from those first kind of 2 quarters of the year. And it was the same thing with AP, but he just kept ascending. And then we start talking about he blew his knee out and he had he didn't just have ACL, he had to have micro where they had to screw the bone, and the Jadeveon Clowney had the same thing, micro fracture surgery, which again, and then gonna go out there and run for almost 2,000 yards this season after. Are you sick? Are you a crazy man? Physically, we know you can do this, but the mental part, and that's the biggest thing. And like I always have a theory, and it's kind of an inside joke, but running backs, you got to be a special type of mindset to be that. And sometimes when you look at Adrian Peterson, every now and again, he gives you that glance like, oh, he's crazy. Just get out the way. Don't try to tackle him. And I've felt this firsthand when I tried to tackle this man in the NFL as a professional myself. You can't do it. You need all 11 people and maybe somebody from the sideline putting their foot out there to trip him too.
Oh, man, he definitely had a little bit of a crazy look in his eye. That's for sure. The Adrian Peterson was
eye of the tiger. He had the eye of the tiger.
He absolutely did.
Don't look too long.
It's a look that says, I'm going to run for 2,000 yards in a season, and there's nothing that you can do to stop me.
That's right.
This is fun discourse, but the Arch Manning discourse has kind of gone off the rails a little bit, whether it be Paul Feinbaum, Steve Spurrier. A lot of people have had a lot of thoughts about Arch Manning. Do we really think he's that good? I'll ask Langston Moore this same question on the other side as we continue on our football talk here on the Postgame Show. All right, second segment with friend of the show, Langston Moore, and really the real MVP of last year's media days. And Langston, I don't think we're going to have as much fun in Atlanta without the absolute haul of food that you were able to bring by at Dallas last year. Still talked about to this day. It was legendary.
I appreciate it, and if I'm going to be remembered for something, it's be remembered for it. Langston Moore came through with the snacks. He came through there with the food, and we had a good time. I don't know what else we did. I don't know if we got no work done. But if that's my legacy, put that on my tombstone or put it on my eulogy or whatever. I'll take it. But, man, y'all going to be all right in Atlanta. The only thing is again, scheduling, my real boss, my wife and daughter, they ain't going to let me come down there and play around with y'all like we did last year. But I wish I could take y'all down through the back I-85 late night, the tasting menu from, let's say, the 2 o'clock to the 7 o'clock hour in Atlanta.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness, I'm talking. We would have the Magic City tasting.
Yes.
We gonna see if your man actually got kicked out. Was it worth getting kicked out of the bubble for that?
Lou Williams.
Magic City pinups. Man, I'm just telling you, I will take all of y'all around. Well, not all of y'all, but I will live vicariously. And we don't even need a budget. Terry Ford don't even got to approve this. I'm just going to send an invoice after I go around to all these establishments that are open late. And, of course, we will finish off with a Waffle House, or there's a diner right there near 400 in Buckhead called, I think it's called Apple Diner. Again, if you've been in the city long enough in Atlanta, you're going to stumble through there about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, but you don't go there if it's 5, 6 o'clock in the morning because you take you behind the Waffle House, so there's nuance. But I just wish there's somebody out there that will Sherpa y'all around, maybe not to the degree that I could in my old Atlanta running days, but I am older, Elijah, but I think there's going to be a nice eclectic mix, and you won't have a shortage of places to eat while y'all down there, man. It's just going to be a little bit different menu.
Oh, the Magic City wings are such a thing of legend that it's been on the bucket list to try. It is absolutely been on the bucket list.
I do a good amount of charity work in making sure that you get to this establishment with the right amount of ones and the right amount of hunger, and we see everything we need to see. I can make this dream happen. I don't know if I can make a lot of dreams happen, Elijah, but just to take a peek, we can make this one happen. But no, again, all this stuff aside, I used to say the same thing when I was like, I'm never eating in these places. I've been to some places that are almost 5-star in Detroit and Atlanta. A couple other places, and you didn't arrive there for the food, but you're like, oh, this place actually has some good food and scenery in here. It's awesome.
It becomes a pleasant surprise after that. That's for sure.
Until you come home and your wife is like, hold up. What are you doing at this place during this? I'm taking
these charges are from where?
That's right.
Well, you have to understand the wings. It's the wings.
That's why you just hope it's just like Wolf of Wall Street. E&J Entertainment. That's just all we just saying. It's just E&J Entertainment at the end of the day.
I can find a way to pull it off.
Y'all have a great time, man. It's going to be awesome down there in Atlanta. And again, nice little tour. They were in Dallas last year for the SEC Media Day, so I just feel it's going to just be very Georgia heavy and very Alabama heavy down there.
Absolutely. It won't be as Texas heavy as it was last year, but maybe the player who gets mentioned the most when it comes to just the discourse going around SEC Media Days is going to be Arch Manning, and he's kind of taken off as one of the biggest question marks in college football. A lot of people rank him highly as one of the best quarterbacks in college football, despite not playing a full season yet. Steve Spurrier said, how good could he actually be if he sat behind Quinn Ewers, and Quinn Ewers is a 7th rounder. And then Paul Feinbaum on First Take said, this is the best quarterback that we'll see since 2006 when Tim Tebow entered the SEC. So we've got like a wide spectrum of Arch Manning takes that have existed here in the last week and a half or so. But when Langston Moore watches Arch Manning play, when he saw the little that we got to see from him last year with a couple of starts with Quinn Ewers injured, and with a couple of maybe specialty snaps that he got in games like the Georgia games and the Texas A&M game, what do you see? What is fact and what is fiction when it comes to evaluating Arch Manning and that Texas offense?
Well, I do know he has the pedigree. He has the name, like Hunt or what else? Like the Kennedys or something like that. Yep. Or maybe he's even a Holtz, and he's won championships in Notre Dame, and then the other younger Holtz has won championships in the USL with the Stampeders and all these. So he's in the family business, but I kind of err towards more to the side of the quarterback guru, the guy that I've known to get the most out of all quarterbacks, maybe not the most talented quarterbacks, is Steve Spurrier. And, like, I think that's a very spot-on thing. Now, I will add the caveat to this because unlike Steve would have probably been the dude in the NIL era, all these things going on, we know there's probably a good chance that Arch was making maybe just as much money possibly, or somebody was making sure that he got paid just as much as the other guy in front of him. And so just to keep him there, not to ever have him looking over that shoulder and be like, come on back to the school that your dad went to, not that your uncle went to or that your other uncle went to. Come back to where your dad kind of played wide receiver at, come back there to Ole Miss. So I think it feels like Steve would have been the only guy in this landscape to be like, if Arch Manning was that good, to pull the plug and put him out there. Now, I think Stark, with all those things going on out there in Texas, they had kind of a, that old deal that kind of going back and forth, but it was solidified that they were going with the kid from his name right now that got drafted that we're talking about, Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
But, if it was really that much more, if he could make those much more plays, because, again, you got to think about the cupboard at Texas. There's a lot of elite receivers out there. So, again, was it just more so them making up for Ewers and this was the ceiling that we can get, or was Arch going to just be dropping dimes into that? Now, we saw glimpses of that. We saw glimpses of not just all overall quarterback throws, but we saw him running down the field, pulling the ball, doing a bunch of things I probably wouldn't have done if we're so reliant on his arm. But I think that speaks to more some of the athleticism that Arch has. With all that being said, if he was who he says he was, like we talked about with Adrian Peterson and all those different things, if you're a coach, you put that guy to the side. And you put the man in. You put the kid in, regardless of age, because he's going to help us win. And so I think Steve Spurrier probably gave us the best analysis of that because, bar him, not him being there day in and day out to see what's going on, there probably would have been very few coaches out there that would pull the trigger and say, you know what, we're paying Quinn Ewers this much money. We got him back from Ohio State. Yeah, we got some momentum. He's an older kid, but the upside on Arch Manning, think about Tua Tagovailoa, and that's, again, why the biggest gambling cojones, whatever nice word I can use here, Nick Saban, forever and a day, is always going to be that guy for that because he made that in the most dire of times. We didn't see any of that. We never saw that.
Right.
I think maybe we saw that maybe in, like, Sisters of the Poor when Texas played one of these smaller schools. They, like, kind of let Arch get a little bit more, but, like, nah. And so to hear Paul Feinbaum, and I'm sorry for sucking my teeth and not being a professional, but I didn't hear that till then. But it makes sense that Paul would say that. And plus, what else are we going to talk about between now and the season and all those different things? But come on, man. Come on, says Tim Tebow.
Yeah, Cam Newton was a guy
Manning,
that played too.
I'm upset if I'm Arch Manning right now.
Yeah, but
what I'm saying? If anything, I got to get my Uncle Peyton. Somebody talk to this guy over there. You work at ESPN, right? Uncle, talk to this guy, man. He's comparing me to who? Now, again, Tim Tebow won a lot, but nah. So with all that being said, not to be the homer, I think Lenoris should be way higher than this guy. But, again, a lot of upside. If his name wasn't Manning and if it was, I don't know, what's another, let's say if it was Esiason, Boomer Esiason's son, third iteration or something like that. Would we be this excited? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a whole lot to that. And before we get you out here, Langston, too, you mentioned Lenoris, and obviously this whole offseason's been kind of like as the hype train of Lenoris Sellers turns, recognition everywhere, a lot more media appearances. His life's a whole lot different in July of 25 than it was July of 24. And with that, the team expectations are raised through the roof too. What's your reasonable expectation for this team given their schedule?
Well, I was looking the other day, and again, our home schedule is favorable. Vanderbilt, we got our out-of-conference stuff with South Carolina State. Of course, we finish up with the Clemson at that game, and we already put the time and the date and the stamp on that one, so we know what's up with that. So we have the biggest thing for this is just going to be what is this team going to be like when we go on the road, and that's always been one of the biggest measures of the teams that I've been on that had success. You went out on the road and you won, and you reveled in going on the road, because I'm gonna just tell you, there's a lot of great things in life, but going into anybody's stadium, especially SEC stadiums, and beating these people, I'm just talking you remember. I go to sleep at night, I'll think about this. Matter of fact, I'll think about the Georgia game tonight. Just how we tore up those hedges before, and Brian Scott caught that pass in the end. Oh my goodness, Kevin Breedlove. Oh, we did it to you, man. And so I think that's going to be the real test of this team, because I think we should handle home. We should obviously be undefeated all the way going into the Clemson game, and I'll go ahead and put that other Texas team in there. We should beat them.
Okay.
The road game is the road test week in and week out, because again, we talk about the SEC. We've been talking about the crowds and the stadiums. the real test is going to be that. And I think, again, the last time we saw our boy, Lenoris, your daddy up there in Clemson, he pulled it out on the road with a few seconds left. So if that's past performance being a future predictor, I'm very confident in what we have to look for. I won't give you my keys and how many games I think we'll win yet. Still kind of too early for that. But
yes,
I do see us going kind of undefeated. I'll leave the Clemson game up to that, to the very last game. That's going to be its own deal. We should be undefeated at home, but the true test is going to be that road record and getting off and being comfortable going in and upsetting people out there on the road, because it's not going to be difficult, even with all the stuff that we're going to have with the quarterback, Dylan Stewart, and all those things.
At Remove the Chains on Twitter, athletes and artists, and a man of many, 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 many ventures, Langston Moore. Langston, appreciate you joining me as always, man. Good to have one more chat with you before I have to change sleep schedules.
Man, it's all good, man.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, I'll give you my most underrated 4th of July food. And a couple of you on the text line agree when the postgame show continues. Well, with the 4th of July coming up, great beer holiday as well. We were talking about food on the 4th of July, but fantastic beer holiday as well. And if you're interested in discounted beer, raise hand here, then you would love our craft beer card. Right now it's only $59, and they did the math for me on the sheet. That way I didn't have to do it and sound dumber than I am when it comes to tallying numbers. But you could save around $300. Just go to 1075.com, click on Sweet Deals, and you should be able to access and purchase one of those craft beer cards and get some great discounts in some local craft breweries, and counts for food too. That's the best part. Absolutely the best part. But I told you I was going to give you my most underrated 4th of July food. We have that on our Twitter feed at 1075 The Game, and we're taking texts on our Firehouse Subs text line as well. And KT from Lexington and I are in the same boat here because he said yellow potato salad, very underrated, and it's exactly what I was going to say. Because that was one thing that when I was really young, absolutely hated, despised it, didn't want anything to do with it. The look repulsed me. It didn't really have much of a smell, but the lack of smell repulsed me. But the older I got, I've actually tried it, and it's one of those things now. Can't do a cookout without. It's my favorite. It's one of my favorite sides at any type of cookout. To me, that's the most underrated 4th of July food. Billy from Blythewood says an ice-cold watermelon. Yes, I actually have one in my fridge right now. Very excited. This is the perfect time to use it. I think outside of 4th of July, I don't really consume a lot of watermelon at all. And going back to my man KT from Lexington, he also gave his start bench drop with today's prompt, which is non-QBs that were Heisman finalists that probably should have won the Heisman between Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian Peterson, and Ndamukong Suh. He is starting Larry Fitzgerald, benching Adrian Peterson, cutting Ndamukong Suh. I do think that that's probably, and so far we've got three entries here, and that's been the most popular drop is Ndamukong Suh. And honestly, I was going to bench Suh because honestly, that 2009 season, one of the best defensively in the history of college football. That Nebraska offense had a really good running game. Taylor Martinez kind of took the country by storm with some electrifying plays. But man, Ndamukong Suh is such a one-man wrecking crew that it made up for any type of mistakes anywhere else. In that Big 12 title game, again, where he had 4.5 sacks, 12 tackles, 6 for loss, single-handedly kept them in that game. That Texas offense was a buzzsaw. And Colt McCoy was one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football that year, and they held them to 13 points. Really, is a game that Nebraska probably should have won. They had that game won. And that was really the height of Nebraska since Tom Osborne was coaching. Bo Pelini never really reached those heights after that, and then Nebraska football's kind of been Nebraska football ever since. But for me, I have to drop Suh because I can't drop Adrian Peterson. That one would probably weigh on my conscience a little more. I'm starting Larry Fitzgerald just because that guy is one of my 3 or 4 favorite college football players of all time. And look, the most fun I had today was going back and watching some Larry Fitzgerald tape and some of the catches that he made. Obviously, the contested catches are one thing. Like, if you were double covering Larry Fitzgerald, he's still open. He's one of those guys. Doesn't matter what coverage you throw at him, Larry Fitzgerald was open, and he made Rod Rutherford look like Peyton Manning on a lot of Saturday nights. But he made a couple of catches, like over-the-shoulder catches. I think it was his second game in his career at Texas A&M. Double covered. He's looking up, and he's trying to make an over-the-shoulder catch, and he kind of makes it almost behind him, too. Like, his momentum's going the complete opposite way, and it's one of the more impressive catches I've ever seen. Larry Fitzgerald was just the man, so I'm starting him, and then the deeper dive I took on Adrian Peterson's freshman year alone made it to where I couldn't drop that guy. I mean, we're like I was telling Langston, I don't think we're ever really going to see 148 yards per game average for a freshman that played every single game that season, or a freshman that plays a full season and has more 200-yard rushing games than sub-100-yard rushing games. That one, I had to double take. I had to count everything up again and make sure I got that right before I said that publicly, because it is so hard to comprehend. That's the end of hour number 1. I want to start hour number 2 with something that I asked Langston Moore and something that I want to get on the record. It's the Arch Manning discourse. How good is he really? Is it worthy of the hype? I'll have what Paul Feinbaum said earlier this week, and I'll give you my deep dive on how good he really is. And the postgame show kicks off hour number 2. Hour number 2 of the postgame show starts right now. I'm Elijah Campbell. No Jay Phillips today, still on vacation, but he'll be back on Monday. But instead of me being here in this chair, it'll be Terry Ford, because if you haven't heard already, if you're listening for the first time in a couple days, mixing some things up here on the game, I'll be moving. Think of it as like a three-way trade, right, in the NBA. I've been traded to the postgame show. The halftime show receives Bill Gunner. Postgame show receives Terry Ford. So where I'm sitting right now, Terry will be on Monday with Jay Phillips as we kind of enter into a new era here at the game. And, of course, going to miss a lot of our normal listeners at this hour. Hopefully you're able to join me in the mornings as well. One of those is my man Justin. Justin's calling in to weigh in on his most underrated 4th of July food. My vote was potato salad. Love potato salad.
How you doing, Elijah?
I'm fantastic. Justin, what is your most underrated 4th of July food?
Well, the New York is hot, but it's okay, but I know New York just can't get a big name, but look at downstairs. You told New York next year because she wants to see if it does expand at some point. And we got to wish my brother the best luck because he's not my first choice, but it is what it is. And for my football because I played Joseph Wheels and pork sandwich and
Okay.
green beans and macaroni and that's it.
Okay.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July to you too, my man. Absolutely. Appreciate you as always. Green beans. First green bean mention we've had today. That is for sure. I'm not a green bean guy. Just not me personally. But Justin, Knicks fan, not his first choice with Mike Brown, and I was saving it for the 5 o'clock news, but I'll drop a little bit of it right here too. The Knicks coaching search was just such a disaster, and it's so quintessential New York Knicks that you fire the coach that got you to an Eastern Conference final for the first time since the turn of the century, and you had zero plan on what to do after that. Zero plan. Usually if you fire somebody, like the Warriors fired Mark Jackson after a couple of successful playoff runs, considering what their history was before Mark Jackson became the coach. But they fired him with the intent of hiring Steve Kerr because they knew Steve Kerr could unlock something from Steph Curry, and they knew that he could take him to the next level. That wasn't a drawn-out coaching search, an unpopular firing with Mark Jackson, but a popular hiring with Steve Kerr, and the rest is history. Don't think we're getting that with Mike Brown. I really don't. I like Mike Brown. I think Mike Brown is an above-average NBA coach, but I don't understand throwing away the chemistry that Thibodeau had with those guys and the way he had things running there for a guy that was maybe, your 5th, 6th choice? If you realize, you got to do a little intel beforehand. You got to call some teams beforehand to see exactly if anybody's going to let you interview their coaches. Because that really was the big thing. They wanted to interview Jason Kidd. Dallas Mavericks turned that down. And many other teams turned down the Knicks' request to interview their sitting head coaches. The Knicks really Leroy Jenkins to this entire coaching search. If you know, you know. But I mentioned it going into this hour. The discourse around Arch Manning has a very broad spectrum, right? We are getting it a lot from both sides. A lot of people saying he's overrated. He's not a top 10 quarterback. Other people have him as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. And Paul Feinbaum specifically takes that take about being one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, but takes it a little further.
The absolute roof. I think there's a reasonably good chance that Arch Manning will be sitting on the front row in New York at the Heisman ceremony. That's assuming that his team does what it's supposed to do and compete for not only the SEC, but for the national championship. And I really believe they will. I think Steve Sarkisian, who's one of the most amazing play callers I've ever seen, made a critical mistake late in the year. He was way too loyal to Quinn Ewers, who was banged up and was really ineffective. Had Arch Manning been instituted in the second half of that game, like Nick Saban did a couple of years ago with Tagovailoa, I think there's a reasonably good chance that Texas would have beaten Ohio State and won the national championship. They're very capable of doing it again this year. I believe also that Arch Manning is the best college football quarterback we have seen since Tim Tebow entered the scene in 2006.
Woo, the best quarterback we've seen enter the scene since Tim Tebow in 2006? Paul, Cam Newton played football. It was really good at it. Joe Burrow played football. We compared and contrasted those guys' careers in yesterday's show with a start, bench, drop thought exercise. But that's a lot there. There's a whole lot there, a whole lot of hype and a whole lot of people that are doubting him, and that's totally fine because we saw him in really a small sample size last year. But what I want to do right now is try to separate fact from fiction, projection from reality. So I looked at what we actually saw from him on the field this past year, and every year I do this with every quarterback in the SEC, and I try to do it for as many position groups as humanly possible to paint this picture, and I do a lot of statistical comparisons, and I also take notes at the end of what I saw from them with my eyes. I try to marry the eye test in the numbers as much as humanly possible, but I do a lot of these side-by-sides, and this is what I've learned, and I've already completed this with the quarterbacks in the SEC. In terms of PFF pass grade, again, this is the Pro Football Focus pass grade. You take it with a grain of salt. These are people that crunch a lot of film, and they give out these grades. It's not law. It's not gospel, but it is an opinion. Only Garrett Nussmeier and Diego Pavia had higher passing grades than Arch Manning, not counting a couple players with smaller sample sizes than Arch had, like a Bo Prabula, who's going to be playing at Missouri, who was at Penn State last year, or an Austin Simmons at Ole Miss, who just got garbage time snaps, or a Ty Simpson from Alabama, garbage time snaps. I try to denote small sample sizes. But in terms of the PFF pass grade, it goes Garrett Nussmeier, Diego Pavia, Arch Manning. And then in terms of the run grade for quarterbacks, again, trying to denote for small sample sizes, and again, take it with a grain of salt, Arch was only behind Taylon Green and John Mateer in the run grade. Now, I think Lenoris's run grade would have been higher if it weren't for some of the fumbles early on in the year. I think that they do weigh out fumbles pretty heavily. I think if you take that out of the equation, Lenoris is probably leapfrogging all three of those gentlemen right there. But then in terms of the actual stats, too, a 9-to-2 touchdown to interception ratio is solid, even in a small sample size. And you look at the teams that he started against, I believe his starts were against, Louisiana Monroe, UTSA, and Mississippi State. Those are the three games that he had to quarterback with Quinn Ewers being sidelined due to injury. So he really only has one career SEC start, and he made it against the worst team in the SEC last year with a very much so rebuilding Mississippi State program. But a 9-to-2 touchdown interception ratio in that small sample size is good. That's something you can take up as a positive. But only Gunnar Stockton, in terms of adjusted completion percentage, which is just what your completion percentage is, but it accounts for drops. So if you throw one and it hits the receiver right in the hands and he misses it, adjusted completion percentage counts it as a completion because it should have been caught. Gunnar Stockton, Bo Prabula, Blake Shapen from Mississippi State, all SEC quarterbacks that had better adjusted completion percentages. And that's the list. So going into the season, he's fourth on that list. And then you look into some of the further numbers too. Arch is a really good deep ball thrower. And I think that's the one thing that maybe fuels a lot of the hype with Arch Manning is that he does throw the deep ball really well. He is a polished deep ball passer, and he doesn't really put it into harm's way a lot. And really, his 21% rate of passes that travel over 20 air yards is one of the highest in the SEC. And his adjusted completion percentage on those passes is almost 50%. So on the passes that Arch has had to make on a football field that traveled over 20 yards in the air, he's completed almost half of them. That's good. Those are low percentage passes that he completes at a really high level, especially compared to the rest of the SEC. He's kind of in the upper echelon there in terms of those. He's an average intermediate thrower compared to his peers at the Southeastern Conference. Those numbers are not as good. They're in the bottom end of it. And that intermediate area really is just the 10 to 19 air yard part, right? That's not his forte. That's where maybe some of the mistakes happen. That's where the accuracy can improve a whole lot right there. That's really, if we're trying to find knocks on his game right now, outside of, he wouldn't be considered this good if he wasn't last named Manning. We can say that, yes, the intermediate throws do need work. And that's one of the knocks on him. But he does have the best adjusted completion percentage on passes in the short range, which is just 0 to 9 yards. That number is 92%. Now, of course, that number needs to be really high because you're not chucking it down the field. These are short, higher percentage passes, but he completes those. And they're expected to be caught. And he doesn't really put the ball in harm's way, too. He rates really well in big-time throw metrics and turnover-worthy plays, where he doesn't have a lot of turnover-worthy plays, so he's not putting it in harm's way a ton. And he is making some throws that are better than the expectation of somebody in that position. So there's the upside, right? But what really should be the red flag, or something that we should all watch for when trying to accurately assess what Arch Manning is, because really when people do these SEC quarterback rankings this far ahead of the season, especially as it pertains to quarterbacks with small sample sizes, we do a lot of projecting. And if you're trying to project Arch Manning and you're trying to find a flaw that needs to seriously be covered up or improved upon, it's how he is under pressure. Because he rated very, very poorly in the percentage of pressures that he experienced that were turned into sacks. So on plays where he drops back to pass and it's considered that he was pressured, he was sacked on 27% of those dropbacks. That's bad. That's more than 1 out of every 4 dropbacks where he's pressured, he can't get rid of the ball. He's got to be able to figure out when to get rid of the football and when to call it a play or, try to scramble, because he does have really good athleticism. I mean, he's the opposite of his uncles and Peyton and Eli in terms of being a statue. He actually has some wheels. He's got some really good athleticism to him. And he's faster than I think a lot of people realized whenever he came into the game a few times last year. And remember, when Ewers was still the starter, Arch would come in plays that required short distance. Kind of, I call them the Tim Tebow snaps, the freshman Tim Tebow snaps, where Chris Leak would be the quarterback on first, second down. If it's 3rd and 2, Tim Tebow's in there running the ball. They ran a trick play where the ball snapped in between Arch's legs in the SEC championship game, and Texas got a first down because Georgia was so bunched in preparing for a QB sneak because Arch has good size, and he's able to push the pile a little bit. And he is such a good runner. You have to protect the outside because he can get to the perimeter, and he can win a foot race, even with SEC defenses. But when the pocket collapses, he has a really hard time when it comes to taking sacks, and his Pro Football Focus grade when he's under pressure is 40. That's bad. A 40 grade in anything, what we're doing on a scale of 1 to 100, is failing. So if we're doing a test analogy here, Arch Manning is failing the test whenever the pocket breaks down. And you don't need the numbers or the dudes at PFF to tell you that he struggles with that. All you got to do really is watch the game where Georgia was at Texas, and when Quinn Ewers was struggling and Texas was turning the ball over, especially in their own territory, Steve Sarkisian did try to make the move to bring in Arch Manning and see if he can get a spark. And Georgia just ate up Texas's offensive line that game. Really, that was the only game all year where Texas's offensive line looked pedestrian, because that was one of the best units in college football. But Georgia got into the backfield with ease, and Arch Manning looked like a panicked first-year starter in college football. Took some sacks, made some bad plays, and the pressure that Georgia put on him clearly rattled him. And that's the part with Arch Manning that has to get better. There are some serious pros with his game and some serious cons with it too, which makes the truth lie somewhere in the middle. I don't think, it's a bad sign that he couldn't beat out Quinn Ewers, with Quinn Ewers being a 7th-round draft pick. That means nothing to me, because you can easily use the same analogy. Say if Cam Newton was so good at Florida, why didn't he start over Tim Tebow early on in his career? Well, there's a loyalty thing there. Quinn Ewers is a good college quarterback. Tim Tebow was a great college quarterback. Cam Newton was an even better one, in my opinion. But there is a seniority, and Cam wasn't ready. What Cam Newton was when he was at Florida was not what he was at Auburn. And what Arch Manning was last year isn't what he's going to be with a full offseason of knowing he's the starting quarterback. So I can leave that judgment to the side, but I'm also not here to say that he's going to come in and be the best quarterback to enter the SEC since Tim Tebow in 2006. That part is nonsense, because there's a lot of other quarterbacks who've come into the league since then who have been a lot better under pressure and don't take a lot of sacks. Can he get to that point? Certainly. When you're that good of a deep ball passer, you stretch defenses. When you're that good of a runner, you can make magic happen, and you stress defenses in different ways. But as we stand right now, the truth certainly lies somewhere in that middle, and I think it's maybe on the higher end if he can clean a lot of that stuff up. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Brett Bielema is talking again, and we're comparing and contrasting the SEC in the Big Ten. We'll hear what Brett had to say when the postgame show continues. Here in about 10 minutes, time to Better Call Saul. So we get my man Michael Sauls from the State on to talk about his piece on Jason Brown, a Gamecock favorite, or Gamecock fan favorite, a guy who we will never forget the win against Florida in 2021 and the season that he had unexpectedly, and a really good catch-up story that Michael wrote on him. We'll have Michael on to talk about that again here in about 10 minutes or so. And then in the 5 o'clock news, we have good news for Gamecock fans. There's a recruiting W that they earned today. And if you're a Braves fan and a Gamecock fan, I'll have to deliver the good news with some bad news because another Braves player has hit the IL, and you're not going to like who it is this time. All that coming up here in about 40 minutes or so. But right now, Brett Bielema continues his media tour so far this offseason. He was on the Triple Option Pod just the other day. And, of course, Brett Bielema has quickly risen to Gamecock villain around these parts, pretty much after the Citrus Bowl confrontation between Coach Beamer and Coach Bielema. Obviously not a lot of love lost between those two, if I could speak English correctly. So he's kind of risen in terms of being a villain here in this market. And he's talked a lot about that incident and a lot of other things at length. But this was him on the Triple Option Pod talking about the differences between the Big Ten and SEC. Here's what he had to say. Do we agree with any of this?
I think first off, and I get it, you guys got to drive likes and value and all that goes into your podcast as well. But really, it's like arguing about like two premium businesses, like whether you like Chevy or Ford, or maybe it's maybe more a Jaguar or a Rolls Royce. Like it whatever you want to say. Two incredibly gifted leagues. The passion from their fan bases is unparalleled. The differences, I would say, probably jump out right away is. Just the venues you play in. Like Ohio State's an incredible stadium, but and Michigan is the Big House is a great stadium. I think our place is going to turn into that. We just had our first sellout in over 20 years, but in the SEC, it's those small market values, right? And the passion in those little. I remember, the furthest you had to stay away from a game, a hotel. When you played in the Big Ten was 20 minutes. You go to the SEC and you might have to drive an hour and a half to get to the hotel that you could stay at, right? And that literally said something to me right away. But the fan bases, the way they follow their people, obviously in the South, one thing that is everything's kind of played, I would say, in pretty conducive weather environments. In the North, in the Big Ten, you're going to play in bad weather with cold. You're going to play in all four seasons. You're going to play in all four time zones now, and we're really different. The SEC in that model is just that you're going to, and for me, I use this one all the time. Like, if I was recruiting a young Mark Ingram again, right, and if it was down to Wisconsin and Alabama, I would just, share with them that, hey, you're going to prove to 32 NFL teams that you can play in all types of climates and weather, right? You go to the South and you play at Alabama, you're really playing in that environment year round. You're training in it, you're living in it. So if the New York Giants, the Jets, the Vikings, the Packers, the Seahawks, the Chiefs want to select someone, they're going to want someone that plays in all four seasons because and it's proven that they can do it. So there is a little bit of an advantage there, but otherwise, two really premium conferences.
There's some truths there. I mean, they're different. The Big Ten and the SEC are different, and I think the biggest truth that Brett spoke in that clip is the 4 time zones thing. Obviously, a real thing because the Big Ten has bloated to the point of having 4 teams on the West Coast of the United States, and that makes travel really hard for some of them, and that combines some of the things from the old Pac-12 into the Big Ten, so the whole stereotype of Big Ten just going out there and having one wide receiver and stacking the line of scrimmage and just playing 3 yards in a cloud of dust still remains with some teams, Iowa. But it doesn't exist within the entire structure of the conference as maybe it did 20-something years ago. In the SEC, we've got a variance of play styles, too. Some teams that can be more run-oriented. Some teams, are a little more likely to air it out. I think of Tennessee and Mississippi State as teams that want to air it out because of what their coaches' philosophies are. Josh Heupel and Jeff Lebby are kind of birds of a feather in that regard in terms of how they prefer to run their offense. But you also still have a team like Vanderbilt and Coach Beck over there who really maybe runs one of the more unique offenses in all of college football that has a lot of quarterback rollouts, a lot of unique ways to get the ball to talented tight ends, which is why Eli Stowers is going to have a really good year. He's going to be a fun player to watch in the SEC. So you have some variance there. The variance thing is a lot different now than it used to be. But the one thing that I just don't agree with Brett here is like the whole weather part. Yes, I know it gets really cold in the north, and I know it's colder for a lot longer, and it's a harsher cold. But we got to, as a nation, we have to go ahead and stop assuming every state that is represented in the SEC is Miami, right? Like, yes, it's hot here in Columbia, and it's not really going to you're not really going to have a ton of cold weather games here. But in the SEC, you are also in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It gets cold in Fayetteville in November and in late October. As somebody who has been to plenty of games in October and November at Neyland Stadium, there have been plenty of times where I froze. It can still be cold. Cold is cold anywhere, right? And with the exception of a few, it's going to get cold once it gets to November anyway. And yes, I don't believe at all that the reason Ohio State took Tennessee to the woodshed in the college football playoff was because it was like 10 degrees outside. Not at all. Absolutely not. They beat them because they're a significantly better football team. I think if you played a game between Wisconsin and South Carolina right now in Madison, Wisconsin, but instead of right now, make it, December 15th when it's really cold, or even in January, I still expect South Carolina to win because South Carolina is the better football team. I think the weather aspect of that is significantly overblown so many times when it comes to a lot of the discourse in talking about football. Like a perfect example, playoffs in the NFL in 2022 or 2021. Packers, 49ers. Packers, number one seed in the NFC. One of the best teams in football all season long. They were the clear favorite to end up winning the NFC, and this was really Aaron Rodgers' last great chance at winning a Super Bowl. And they get a wild card team in the San Francisco 49ers, which it can get cold in San Francisco. I've heard, never been, but I know it can get cold. But they go to the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field, and they win a rock fight. I thought the Packers were supposed to succeed in that type of weather. It snowed. That should play to the Packers' benefit, not to the 49ers' benefit. And Aaron Rodgers had one of his worst playoff games in his career. And this is from a team that is accustomed to that type of weather. It may be just one of the most overrated things in sports when we talk about weather conditions because, A, cold anywhere is cold. B, both teams have to play in it. One team doesn't get to play in a air-conditioned or a heated dome, and the other team has to have their offensive possessions with the roof down. Doesn't work that way. Both teams have to play in it. But there's a lot of truth to what Brett Bielema said, and that's really more of a reflection of the modern college football landscape with just conferences getting bloated for TV ratings and having your entire conference literally range from the East Coast to the West Coast, from Piscataway, New Jersey to Los Angeles with UCLA and Southern Cal. So really, that's kind of the breakdown of what Brett Bielema had to say. And listen to 2 minutes of it, and I didn't completely disagree with it the entire time. Illinois should be pretty good again this year, too. Michael Sauls from the state, my pal, a softball teammate of mine, rec softball teammate. He saw me get hurt, but he also got to talk to Jason Brown, former South Carolina quarterback. He caught up with him. It was a very interesting article. Highly recommend you give it a read. Michael's going to join us on the other side to talk about that when the postgame show returns. From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. With a few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon. Starting with one on Clemson Road at I-20, another one at Forum Drive between Fashion Drive and Marketplace Common Circle, Green Lawn Drive at Garner's Ferry Road, and lastly, one on I-77 southbound over at 12th Street and Saxgotha Exit 2. If you're looking for good off-season South Carolina Gamecock reads, especially when it comes time to going into the Wayback Machine and thinking about fun teams of past, fun players that you may have forgotten, well, you've come to the right place because my man Michael Sauls from the State, who joins me right now, writes today, quarterback Jason Brown has one big regret from his time at South Carolina. Very much so worth a read, especially considering the 2021 team in general being Shane Beamer's first and exceeding expectations. But, Michael, appreciate the time for joining me, especially on short notice, and really excited to get to have you on. It's time to better call Sauls, if you will.
Yes, sir. Elijah, thank you, as always, for having me.
Yeah, and I was talking to you off air a little bit about, how the story came up, and I know you've been trying to do, some work with the 2021 quarterback room, but when you got Jason Brown on the phone, I think you probably got more than you were anticipating getting from him, right? Because he seemed to be really candid in this story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I started interviewing him for a story that I've all but abandoned, and then it kind of morphed into another story. Kind of just went into it, wanted to talk about, that year, and then I just kind of asked him. I was like, hey, after you left South Carolina, you didn't have a really successful season at Virginia Tech, and then you had Jackson State. Like, do you regret leaving? And then he was, like you said, extremely candid. He flat out told me he regrets leaving South Carolina. And even though, his time at South Carolina wasn't 100% successful, I mean, the 7 games that he played in Columbia clearly had an impact on him and his life. And he regrets it to this day.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, I don't think anyone really blames him from leaving. And of course, your story got a lot of traction with people who have followed Jason since then. Shane Beamer tweeted about it today, and Shane and Jason, exchanged pleasantries on Twitter. So I don't think anybody really blames him from leaving because really when you play like he did in some of those games, I mean, the Florida game was a ton of fun. That was an exciting win that year, helped secure bowl eligibility. But when you hear Spencer Rattler's coming in and you only have so much time in on your eligibility clock when you play college football, you want to maximize that as much as possible. I don't think anyone ever actually blames him for leaving. But what's one of the reasons why, despite having every reason to leave to try to get more playing time, did he tell you that he wished he could have hung around a little bit?
It's one of those things that you hear a lot from coaches and players, and it kind of sounds like coach speak, but really it's just the program and the people around it. And it's one of those things where, I'm working on this other story, and I've talked to other quarterbacks that have played at South Carolina and who have, who sat around when they could have left. But it really is, they love the program, they love the coaching staff, they love the people at South Carolina, they love the connections they've made in Columbia because of playing at Carolina. Like when I was talking with Jason, who was recently got married, he was like, yeah, I got my tux that I wore my wedding for free when I was just in casual conversation telling them that I played quarterback in South Carolina, and they said they were Gamecocks fans. So
wow,
it really did just kind of boil down to he loved the area, he loved the program, and he loved the people involved. And it's one of those things that I feel like a lot of us kind of brush off as coach speak, but it's just the perfect example of, oh, wait, maybe there is some validity to that, and that's not just coach speak.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, too, just by looking at the reaction from the story, seeing Shane tweet about it as well, like head coaches in college football now can be bitter when a player leaves. Sometimes not every player leaves in the best standing with their former head coaches. A lot of them, they're probably at odds as maybe one of the reasons why they actually leave. It's just part of what we live in now with the new college football landscape. But what do you think Jason's words to you about Coach Beamer mean, and what Coach Beamer has said about Jason means about how Shane deals with his players and how much that sticks with guys when they have gone to different colleges and that still kind of sticks out to them in their minds?
I think it's just what we all have kind of been led to believe, and as who Shane is. I mean, he's a great guy. He's a great coach. He's a player's coach. I mean, you see him, doing the goofy TikToks in the off season, making fun of Mark Stoops and stuff. You see stuff like that. You see how personable he is and how genuine he is, and it's one of those things that clearly sticks with these players no matter how long they play for him. I mean, shoot, Jason Brown played for one season at South Carolina, and he leaves, and he considers South Carolina we. I mean, he literally played for 4 colleges, but the team that he played 7 games for is the team that he leaves as a we with, which I feel like is kind of, one of those small details that's also kind of big. So I really do think it just kind of boils down to who Shane Beamer is and, the impact that he's having on these kids' lives.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why I enjoyed reading this, too, is it kind of takes me back to that 2021 season when Shane kind of gets to Columbia and the cupboard's bare, and he's got to rally the troops that are sticking around, guys who didn't come to South Carolina to play for Shane Beamer. They came to play for Will Muschamp, and there was a whole lot to figure out, a whole lot to happen that season. And going into SEC Media Days in 21, I remember South Carolina being one of those teams from maybe Vanderbilt can finish ahead of them, right? The expectations were incredibly low, and it's wild to look back on the expectations going into that season compared to what the expectations are in 2025, and it's just kind of goes to show the progress that this program has made. But the more that you kind of dig into this 2021 season, and a team that wasn't expected to make a bowl game, becoming bowl eligible, having to go through 3 different quarterbacks, one of which was a grad assistant who they had to have suit up. What has kind of aged best with that 2021 team the further along we get removed from them?
I think it's not even what's aged best. I think it's what's just the most fun to look back on is exactly what you just mentioned with the quarterback situation. I mean, you came into that season with a young budding star and quarterback at Luke Doty, who is still on the team, by the way, playing wide receiver now. I mean, you come into that going, all right, Luke Doty is the future at quarterback at South Carolina. He gets hurt, and so I will never forget it. We're walking in for one of the media availabilities in fall camp in the middle of August, and all of a sudden there's this big dude hanging out with the quarterbacks wearing the number 25 or number 27 on his green quarterback jersey, and we were all going, who is this guy? And then next thing we know, we find out this grad assistant has been turned into a quarterback because he has an extra year of eligibility. And then Luke Doty comes back, but then Luke gets hurt. And then the GA turned QB is now starting. And then that GA turned QB gets hurt. So now you got to go to the FCS transfer. Then the FCS transfer finishes out the season, but then transfers after you get a commitment from some dude named Spencer Rattler. And then you bring in a quarterback turned wide receiver into Kerryon Joyner back to quarterback to win a bowl game in your first year as a head coach at a Power 5 program. I mean, it's absolutely insane to me. Like you said, I mean, you go in with the expectations on the floor, and despite all of that, and that was just at one position. That's not even mentioning the adversity in the rest of the team. The fact that you were able to overcome everything that one spot on the roster is absolutely insane, and it's one of my favorite things to look back on during Shane Beamer's tenure.
That's one of my favorite things about college football. Some 7-5 teams you can look at as being, or 6-6 teams you can look at as being total disasters. You look at this one, and given what the expectations were, it completely changes how you view them. And I think, the further history moves along and advances, the more I think Gamecock fans will appreciate what that 2021 team was able to accomplish given the circumstances. But Michael, before we get you out here too, yesterday we had a killer start bench drop. I tried to up my game today. 3 college football players, non-quarterbacks, that were robbed of Heismans.
Gotcha.
Larry Fitzgerald, Adrian Peterson, and Ndamukong Suh. Start one, bench one, drop one. What's your initial thoughts?
Oh my God. That's tough. it's throwing Sue in there should be illegal.
It was a nasty dude, man.
Yeah. Throwing Sue in there should be illegal. Having two offensive players. Oh God, that's hard, Elijah. That's kind of mean. You're putting me on the spot like that.
That's what
I'm gonna go knee jerk reaction. Start Fitz, bench Sue, cut AP.
Okay, you were the first one to not drop Ndamukong Suh. So an Ndamukong Suh respecter.
Dude, I tell you, as a former washed-up high school defensive lineman, I do love a good defensive lineman.
And the 2009 Big 12 title game, I want to go back and just rewatch because that man wreaked havoc that entire time. I'm sure Colt McCoy still has nightmares about that game.
Absolute dog.
Michael Sauls from the state. If you haven't checked it out already, go ahead. The story is titled Quarterback Jason Brown Has One Big Regret from His Time at South Carolina. Michael, thanks again for joining me, man. And looking forward to seeing you back on the softball diamond here in a short amount of time.
Yes, sir. Have a wonderful rest of your show and day, Elijah.
Absolutely. Michael Sauls. Better call Sauls, the best, man. And you know what? He's getting the hang of the whole third base thing, too. I mean, he had a couple of good snags in the game on Monday. So he's improving on the softball diamond as well. We'll go and take a quick break. When we come back, my man Tyler Head was at it again. The sound master at 107.5 The Game has given us a gift, a 4th of July holiday gift. And it's the best of the best from the funniest man in the NFL at his first offseason press conference. I'll tell you who that is when the postgame show rounds out hour number 2. I wish you guys could have seen the look on my face when I was going through the cut list last night. When Tyler Head emails them out, tells us, what sound we have available to us. And when I saw the name Jameis Winston, I grinned ear to ear. Like the Grinch. Like the little Grinch gif that I like to use all the time where he just has that little evil smile to it. Because I'm like, you know what? We get to hear clips from the funniest man in the NFL. Now, Jameis Winston's career has been all over the place, right? Heisman winner in college, wins a national championship, is a college football legend in his own right, number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, some serious highs, some serious lows, the only player in the history of the great National Football League to throw for 30 touchdown passes and 30 interceptions in the same season. The 30 and 30 club may never have another member. But if all we have in that club is Jameis Winston, then it's a fine enough party to be in. And he's the funniest soundbite in all of football. And as a gift to me, Tyler Head did not know how much joy he was going to bring to me by providing me with a highlight montage of Jameis Winston in his first Giants presser. So when I saw that, I immediately knew I should bless the audience with it as well. So lo and behold, the one, the only, famous Jameis.
Hello. Good to meet y'all. No Zoom, real life. I'm grateful that I can bring joy to the game. I think if you ask any of my teammates, any of my coaches who I am, they would say Jameis is truly who he is. But my job is to be the best Jameis Winston that I can be. When you're a giver, you get back. When you're a taker, you really don't get much back. The toughest way to experience something is through experience. All touchdowns we love. I don't think there's one touchdown that I haven't loved in my life. And what we would love is to be the Super Bowl winning champions. All right, guys. Until next time, all right? Until next time.
Oh, my goodness. I even had to write it down. My favorite part of that is a quote. It's a Yogi Berra-esque quote here. When you're a taker, you really don't get much back. And I don't know why that makes me laugh as hard as it does. Anytime he speaks, it cracks me up because as someone who will also do this sometimes, it's the Michael Scott thing where you start something in a conversation and you kind of forget where you're going with it and you kind of bunny trail a little bit. And then you maybe sometimes, if you're lucky enough, get back to the point you were trying to reach initially. Jameis Winston is the man at that. He's an endless supply of really good sound bites. From, I think my favorite one has to be when he was a member of the New Orleans Saints. And he kind of gets hurt a little bit at the end of the season opener against the Falcons. The Saints win a thriller. They block a field goal at the very end of the game. And he's being asked about, what's going through your mind in that injury. He just goes, pain, just a lot of pain. Still one of the funniest sound bites in the NFL. I challenge anyone to find me, pound for pound, a funnier, whether intentionally or unintentionally, player than Jameis Winston. Now, maybe he plays some this year. He's now a member of the New York Giants, and the Giants have a very interesting dynamic with their quarterback room. They got Russell Wilson. I don't know exactly how much Russell Wilson has left in the tank either. Some promising signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, but I think Jameis Winston himself has kind of slid into that role as like the permanent backup quarterback. And then you have Jackson Dart in the room too, which is really, if we go back to the NFL draft this year, that's the one draft pick I think in the first round I was maybe puzzled by the most because the Giants traded back into the first round to acquire Jackson Dart. I liked Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. I didn't love Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. I thought he was turnover prone. I thought his decision-making really could be a hindrance on what his ceiling was at the next level. So you got 3 different types of quarterbacks in that quarterback room. An aging vet in Russell Wilson who still can play pretty conservatively, takes care of the ball well for the most part still, but doesn't have the ceiling that he did when he was in Seattle and winning a Super Bowl and going to another one. Then you have the ultimate feast or famine quarterback with Jameis Winston, where he can give you a 350, 400-yard performance. You might have 4 touchdown passes mixed in there. You could easily have 4 interceptions mixed in there as well, all of which equally hilarious and memeable. And then you have a wild card rookie in Jackson Dart, somebody who can be really mobile if he breaks outside the pocket, but also decision-making has been a question mark for him as well. Still think that interception he threw against Florida was maybe the worst of 2024, and as someone who watched a lot of college football, watched a lot of interceptions, I've seen a lot of brutal ones. The one he threw against Florida to cost them that game probably was the worst of the year. Interesting quarterback dynamic. So Jameis Winston, not only the funniest player in the NFL, he's in the most interesting quarterback room. And while we're starting to work some NFL in, as training camp really is going to kick off with every single team later this month, probably in about 3 weeks or so. I think most of teams are reporting to camp. One of the more interesting things, and what I wish really was the team that was highlighted on Hard Knocks, was the New York Giants, solely because of that quarterback room and because Jameis Winston, one of my favorite characters in the National Football League. 2 hours down, 1 to go. My final hour as a host on the postgame show. Let's make it a fun one. We have 5 o'clock news. The Gamecocks get a big win in recruiting, and the Braves get a massive loss when it comes to their injury situation. I'll elaborate on more when the postgame show returns. From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways this afternoon, starting with one on Corley Mill Road between US 378 and Sunset Boulevard and South Carolina 6 at North Lake Drive. Also have one on Emmanuel Church Road at South Carolina 602 and Platte Springs Road, Greenlawn Drive at Garner's Ferry Road, 77 northbound at Fort Jackson Boulevard near Exit 10, and lastly, one reported here in the last hour or so, Piney Woods Road near Piney Grove Road. Final hour of this week's post-game show, and my last as the host on here before moving over to the early game. And, of course, reminder, no live show tomorrow or Friday. Been our little mini 4th of July break there, but we're back at it on Monday with a completely different show lineup, so I guess it's maybe appropriate that I throw that in the news, too, if you haven't heard. I'll be moving over to the morning show on the early game with Preston Thorne and Jen Jensen. Bill Gunner is going to be moving over to the midday show, the halftime show with Tyler Head. And then Terry Ford is going to be traded into my spot here to hang out with Jay Phillips from 3 to 6 on this very fine, esteemed radio program every single day. And hope you guys still get to enjoy the new lineup, get to follow us all across from 6A to 6P. Looking forward to that. I'm going to have to learn how to get up a little bit earlier. I can become a morning person if I have to, but looking forward to hanging out with Jen and Preston on a daily basis. But 5 o'clock news, I teased it going into the hour. If you're a Gamecock and Braves fan, there is good news and there's bad news. And when someone presents me with the option to receive bad news first, I'll take the bad news first. So for the Braves and Gamecock fans that are listening, I know you know who you are, and it's a lot of you. So we'll start with the bad news. The bad news comes from the Atlanta Braves side, because one of the bright spots this year has been the starting pitching. Chris Sale's been really good this year. Grant Holmes is really kind of hit his stride right now, and I'll get into it a little later on why he is kind of in starting pitching hell right now. But the Braves get another bad injury blow because Chris Sale's on the IL right now. Don't know when he's expected to be back. And Spencer Schwellenbach, who has been a real revelation for this team this year, is having an awesome, awesome season. It has been announced today, this is from ESPN, quote, Braves ace Spencer Schwellenbach has a fractured pitching elbow, becoming the latest Atlanta starter sidelined with a long-term injury. The Braves announced Wednesday that Schwellenbach was placed on the 15-day injured list as a part of a series of roster moves. The team did not disclose how long Schwellenbach will be sidelined, but MLB.com reported that the second-year right-hander won't throw for at least 4 weeks. Schwellenbach last pitched Saturday when he had a career-high 12 strikeouts in Atlanta's victory over the Philadelphia Phillies. MLB.com reported that Schwellenbach felt sore Sunday, and the team discovered a small fracture in his elbow. So a Braves season that has gone bad has now gotten worse, and I guess, yeah, this is proof that if you ever ask how worse can it can get worse. Schwellenbach for the year, 7-4 of the record for his record, with an ERA of 3.09, and that comes in 17 starts this year. He was third in the National League in innings pitched with 110 and 2/3, third in walks hits per innings pitched under 1 at .97, and 11th in the National League in strikeouts. He struck out 108 batters so far this season. Having a breakout season, and when healthy, the Braves starting rotation is really good. But the bullpen's been really bad. The bats have been inconsistent, and seemingly every time Chris Sale started, the bats completely disappeared. And now with Chris Sale on the IL, Grant Holmes comes in and pitches really well, and seemingly he gets no run support. And it's kind of one of those things where if you want to rank the best pitchers in baseball right now, there's really 4 that stand out. 1, Tariq Skubal from the Detroit Tigers, reigning AL Cy Young Award winner. 2, Paul Skeens, maybe a front runner for the Cy Young in the National League. Number 3, the team that is pitching against the Pirates when Paul Skeens pitches. And then number 4, I think we can do when the team that's playing the Braves when Grant Holmes pitches, because Grant Holmes pitched last night too, and the Angels won 4-0. Holmes with another really solid outing. He's north of 100 strikeouts for the year. Struck out 10 in 6 innings last night, only walked 3, only gave up 3 hits, but that was not enough. He did not give up a single earned run. All of that was surrendered by the bullpen, and of course, Grant Holmes pitches well, which means the Atlanta Braves will not manufacture any runs despite getting 7 hits. So the Braves are now 38-46 on the season. They will play again tonight, as my computer loads here, also against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. I'll get those starting pitchers for you here in just a moment. But that's the bad news for the Atlanta Braves. Now, Jurickson Profar expected to return here from his suspension, so that should help you with the bats. And if you somehow make it to the playoffs, remember, Profar will not be eligible for the playoffs. On the mound tonight for the Braves, Didier Fuentes, after a pretty rough outing in his second go-round, he's 0-2 on the year with a 10.8 ERA and a whip of 1.8. Not ideal. 4 strikeouts, 1 walk in those 2 starts. On the mound for the Angels is Yusei Kikuchi at 3-6 on the year, 2.79 ERA and a whip of 1.37. He struck out 99 batters so far this year, so expect him to get north of that 100 strikeout mark. Continuing with the 5 o'clock news segment, now for the good news for the Gamecock/Braves fans. After 2 straight days of sitting here in this chair and being the bearer of bad recruiting news for South Carolina, as they just missed out on a couple of recruits, one in-state and one out-of-state, they landed a big-time commitment today with Noah Clark. Noah Clark is a defensive lineman, about 6'4", 330. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 126 ranked player nationally, the number 21 defensive lineman, and the number 8 player in the state of North Carolina. He's from Durham and goes to C.E. Jordan High School. He committed to the Gamecocks today over NC State, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and Virginia. So a pretty good win there for Noah Clark. And, of course, he celebrated in a way that I like, to see high school players celebrate their college commitments by putting on a very oversized, very, very large hat. He had a very large Gamecock hat there at the presentation today, but a nice win for South Carolina this year. And when looking at what the 2026 class looks like right now, so far 24/7 has them at 51 overall. I don't know how much that actually accounts into everything else, but On3 had him in the top 20 not too long ago. Expect that to improve with this commitment in terms of where Noah Clark ranks in terms of ranking of commits on 24/7. They have him as the 3rd highest ranked Gamecock commit behind Aiden Harris from Matthews, North Carolina, who's the number 76 player in the country, and Jazavian Currents from Rock Hill, who is currently the number 64 player in the country and the number 1 player in the state of South Carolina, according to 24/7 Sports. Moving on in the 5 o'clock news, the New York Knicks coaching search is over. This is from Shams Charania at about 1 o'clock today. Quote, the New York Knicks are expected to hire 2-time NBA Coach of the Year winner Mike Brown as the franchise's next head coach, sources told ESPN on Wednesday. Knicks president Leon Rose underwent a thorough process since the firing of Tom Thibodeau a month ago. The Knicks requested permission to speak with 5 NBA head coaches and were denied, then interviewed several available coaches and went through multi-round stages with candidates, end quote. And, of course, here locally, it was confirmed the Knicks did reach out to Don Staley about the job, but talks didn't further after that, and they ultimately land on Mike Brown. Our friend Justin called in the second hour of the show. He's a Knicks fan, talking about Mike Brown getting hired. And unfortunately, I think for Knicks fans like him, it's a worse look than what previously was imagined, right, by firing Tom Thibodeau. Look, if you're going to fire a head coach who gets you to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since the turn of the century, because 2000 was the last time the New York Knicks appeared in a conference final, and you fire your head coach, my philosophy is you better know what you're going to do next, and you better know that your first or maybe second option is available. Well, it turned out the first 5 options were not available because they're already employed by other NBA teams, and by the rules, if you want to interview them, you must seek permission from the teams currently employing them. The Knicks did so and got rejected 5 times. I don't think I have been rejected 5 times in my life when it comes to interviewing people. The Knicks absolutely whiffed on this one. Mike Brown's a solid coach, don't get me wrong. I mean, anytime you win 2 NBA Coach of the Years, it's not a bad safety net, but it is when you're coming off of a season where you finally get within reaching distance of the NBA Finals, and you already have a lot of really good chemistry with what you have. The operation is finally running smoothly, and you shake it up, and you're taking a big risk by hiring somebody who was not your first option, your second, your third, fourth, fifth. And if you're a Knicks fan, you can find reasons to be optimistic. You can also find a lot more reasons to be pessimistic. As good as a coach as Mike Brown is, his best seasons happened when he was coaching a under 30 LeBron James, and I don't think LeBron James is going to become a New York Knick, and he's certainly not getting any younger because that's not how aging works. So a very interesting hire there for the New York Knicks, mostly because of the failure that the entire coaching search has been so far. Time will tell exactly how good of a hire this can be. 5 o'clock news rolls along here in the final hour of the show. Keeping it in the NBA right here, the NBA adjusts Greg Popovich's career record and credits Mitch Johnson with games from 24 to 25. It's one thing I've always been curious about, too. When a coach has to leave, maybe because of like health-related issues, kind of like what Greg Popovich had to deal with this year, sometimes the interim head coach will get credit for those wins, but the NBA is now adjusting it. Now, Greg Popovich is still the all-time wins leader. And from ESPN, quote, the NBA's adjusted all-time wins leader Greg Popovich's career record as the coach of the Spurs, removing the 77 games that he missed last season and crediting those wins and losses to new Spurs coach Mitch Johnson. Popovich's final record has been reset to 1,390 and 824, which is where it was entering game on November 2nd, and that was the day that Popovich had a stroke at the team's arena in San Antonio, and Johnson, one of his assistant coaches, took over as acting head coach. So the right move. I mean, look, I'm all for accuracy when it comes to all-time records, and with Greg Popovich being a coach who is the all-time wins leader in the NBA, if someone is to ever get close and have to win more than they really should to get to that pretty coveted record, they would have to do more than what would be accurate, right? So that's a pretty good adjustment there for the NBA and a pretty good precedent to be set as well. That was our 5 o'clock headlines, as always, brought to you by our friends over at Integrated Media. Look, SEC Media Days is in 12 days from now, so a smidge under 2 weeks, which means we are getting so close to football season. And if you have an idea of what you want your home theater system to look like for football season, or you want to do something outdoors, no better time than right now to hit up Michael Geddes and the crew at Integrated Media so they can get you set up for your ideal football watching setup before we get into football season. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, I've compiled a list, and this will bleed over into the drive around the SEC because quarterbacks get the most love when it comes to the transfer portal market. Sometimes we judge a school or a team's transfer portal overhaul with, did they replace the quarterback? And quarterbacks are really important. A lot would argue the most important position in the sport. But I have identified 5 players in the SEC that are not quarterbacks that will be every bit as important if they want to help their teams reach their goals in the 2025 season. I'll tell you who those 5 are when the postgame show returns. In football, quarterbacks sometimes get all of the love. And when we preview a lot of these teams, sometimes the conversation begins and ends with quarterback play. And I get it. Don't hate it. I understand the importance of the quarterback position. And I still stick to the Jordan K. rules, writer for the state newspaper, when he came on with Jay and I in January, once the season ended, and we saw a lot of way too early top 25 polls have South Carolina ranked pretty high. And Jordan said, well, they kind of follow the same formula of, was your team good last year? And is your quarterback coming back? Sometimes it can get dwindled down to that. And, of course, it helps if you have a starting quarterback you're really confident in going into the season. That gets you at a better starting point than maybe a lot of other teams, right? Maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm so hesitant to completely write in pen Alabama going to the SEC championship game or even playing in the college football playoff. But as important as the quarterback position is, they need help around them, and they need a defense that can keep the opposing offense and their quarterback from lighting up the scoreboard. And a lot of transfer talks, when we rate and rank transfers, we start a lot with the quarterbacks. But I've put a little thought into it today, and I made a list. I thought of maybe the 5 most important non-quarterback transfers in the SEC. Guys that, if they become really productive, will make their teams surpass what the normal expectations for them were coming into the season. So we'll go ahead and get it started. This is the running back. First one, Jaden Ott at Oklahoma. Now, he was at Cal last year. This could be a potential save the coach's job type portal get, right? Now, they brought in John Mateer at quarterback, and they're bringing in Mateer's offensive coordinator from Washington State with him. So a lot of the offense is going to be geared around Mateer in the passing game. However, if you can't run the ball, then you're going to be one-dimensional. It's going to be a lot easier to play defense against you. And that was one of the big issues for Oklahoma last year. Now, last year, the Sooners were plagued with injuries, especially with their wide receiving core and on the offensive line. So it made it harder to evaluate guys like Jackson Arnold or Michael Hawkins because they were really playing with one hand tied behind their back because the weapons weren't very good and the offensive line was atrocious. I think we all remember exactly how much South Carolina dominated that game in Norman last year, where the Carolina defense made it to where this game was over within the first 2 or 3 Oklahoma possessions because they were scoring on defense, creating turnovers on the plus side of the field. And before you knew it, it was 21-0. I'm sure a lot of people tuned into that game and saw South Carolina up 21-0 and being like, oh my God, what did I miss? But if Oklahoma wants to avoid a disastrous season, because the defense is still going to be good, any Brent Venables coach team is going to have a good defense because he is a great defensive mind. And we saw what his body of work was as the defensive coordinator at Clemson to affirm that, right? But you really need a running game. And let's just say the John Mateer experiment isn't producing to what we thought the ceiling could be for Oklahoma. It's still survivable for the Sooners if they can run the ball really well. But here's what makes Jaden Ott so interesting in that regard. This man has had a tale of 2 seasons, right? In 2023, he kind of broke out a little bit. He had an 800-yard season as a true freshman. But in 2023, the numbers were incredible. Now, he carried the ball 246 times. That's about 20 carries a game for Jaden Ott. And he rushed for over 1,300 yards, picked up a little over 5 yards per attempt, scored 12 touchdowns. And he was a player coming into this year, or last year, as one of those that can help Cal get to the next level. Now, to Cal's credit, they had a really good year. They won that game at Auburn. They got off to a hot start, was very close to beating Miami, and Cal surpassed a lot of what the expectations could have been for them last year. But Jaden Ott was not really a part of that. Injuries had something to do with it. Sure, but he carried the ball only 116 times in 10 games. That's about what, 11 per game? A big step down for someone like Jaden Ott. I mean, almost getting his carries cut in half, right? And he only had 385 yards. It was the lowest in his 3 years as a running back for the Cal Golden Bears. And in those carries, didn't take much advantage of it. Picked up only 3.3 yards per attempt. So what's Oklahoma getting? how healthy is Jaden Ott coming into the season? If Oklahoma wants to be able to get past that 6-win mark, because reminder, they lost that bowl game to Navy to go from 6-6 to 6-7. It's the second losing season with Brent Venables as the coach at Oklahoma. We've talked at length on this show about maybe how secure is Brent Venables' job really with the Oklahoma Sooners. You know they don't want to fire him because he's got Oklahoma ties. People there love him, but people there also love winning football games more. And I think the loyalty to winning football games is probably more important to Oklahoma Sooner fans and boosters than loyalty to one specific coach. But Jaden Ott could be the saving grace for Brent Venables this year if he's healthy and if the offensive line can help pave the way for him to be more of the 2023 version of himself. Number 2, I have Harrison Wallace, keeping it on the offensive side of the ball here. Formerly of Penn State, now wide receiver for Ole Miss. And to do the Rick Pitino thing, Trey Harris ain't walking through that door. Trey Harris was a large part of that Ole Miss team. Coming into the game here in Columbia, we talked a lot about how reliant Ole Miss's offense was on Trey Harris, despite having a lot of weapons in that receiving core and in the run game. They still relied on Trey Harris for a bulk of that offense. Well, Trey Harris is gone. He's in the NFL now. He got drafted. And they returned Caden Lee, who was kind of a revelation for them and kind of ended up being the better number 2 receiver, what we thought maybe Juice Wells would have once he left Columbia. I know that's a bad name around here, but he goes to Ole Miss and underperformed significantly. But it didn't hurt Ole Miss a ton because Caden Lee really stepped up, but he's more of a slot receiver, right? He's kind of the check down guy. And Jackson Dart had to do a lot of checking down last year, and Caden Lee helped out in that regard. But Trey Harris was not just having one of the biggest target shares, but he was the deep threat. He was the one that stretched the defense. And Lane Kiffin's offenses love having a receiver that they can throw downfield to. They love having a deep threat. And you really need that to keep a defense honest, right? If you can't stretch the field, defenses can play in. They can defend against those intermediate throws. And if they're stopping your run game, your offense is kind of held back. But what Harrison Wallace did at Penn State fits perfectly with what Trey Harris provided them. He's a guy that lined up on the outside a lot. At Penn State last year, Harrison Wallace lined up outside for 88.7% of his snaps. And his average depth of target was 13.5 yards. So the average target that went to Harrison Wallace last year at Penn State traveled almost 14 yards in the air. He can stretch the field a little bit. He's greater in that intermediate area, but he can also make defenses have to respect the long game. But he wasn't as productive at Penn State as you might think. He did catch for 775 yards, but their receiving core last year at Penn State really let them down a lot. And I think it's really telling. Sometimes a coach after a season can tell you one thing, but the actions mean something else. For example, South Carolina here. Yeah, they tried for Casey Concepcion at NC State, wide receiver, who is one of the more coveted receiver portal talents, because there was mutual interest there. And you don't turn down a big-time wide receiver if they want to come to your program. But when he decided to go to Texas A&M, it wasn't doom and gloom, and they weren't frantically searching the United States and the transfer portal to try to find another receiver because they have a really good class coming in. They feel really good about that. Shane Beamer can tell me that he feels really good about this wide receiving class, but if he's feverishly looking for more receivers in the spring portal, that tells me something different. Penn State, in their wide receiving core last year, basically a clean break, like a mutual breakup, right? Almost every single receiver on that team is gone. They have an influx of talent now that's going to replace those guys. Harrison Wallace is one of them. So it tells you one thing, that with a quarterback like Drew Aller coming back, that Penn State really didn't trust the receiving core that they had in 2024. And mind you, this is a team that not only went to the college football playoff, but they won a couple of games in the college football playoff and was a meltdown against Notre Dame away from playing Ohio State again for a national championship. But if Harrison Wallace can kind of tap into the potential he has and show more of the glimpses that he's got and be that downfield threat for Ole Miss, it's going to make life easier on Austin Simmons, who's coming into this season as a first-year starter, the presumed starter for Ole Miss. And that's a player, too, that if Harrison Wallace proves that he can be that downfield threat, it's a player that South Carolina is going to have to account for when they play in Oxford later in the season. Drive Around the SEC is coming next, and I'll keep elaborating. That's 2 players down. That means there's 3 left, and I have an honorable mention that is Gamecock related. I'll tell you who that is when the postgame show returns. From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways. We've got plenty of them. One's got the 2 left lanes blocked on 20 westbound over at Monticello Road near exit 68. We have some other accidents creating more minor traffic backups on Corley Mill Road between US 378 at Sunset Boulevard and South Carolina 6 at North Lake Drive. Emmanuel Church Road at South Carolina 602 and Platte Springs Road. 26 eastbound at Piney Grove Road at exit 104. 77 northbound at Fort Jackson Boulevard, exit 10, Parkland Road near Highway 277, Piney Woods Road near Piney Grove Road, and lastly, one on 2 Notch at North Grampian Hills Road. Time to take a drive around the SEC here on the post-game show. I'm Elijah Campbell. And if you haven't been hearing Jay Phillips today and you're like, I haven't heard Jay yet, he's been awfully quiet. Well, it's because he's still on vacation. But he'll be back on Monday with Terry Ford here from 3 to 6 as part of our new show lineup. But right now, I've been going through. I did a little bit of an early start to the drive around the SEC by giving you my most important non-quarterback transfers in the SEC going into 2025. I already discussed Jade Knott, the running back at Oklahoma from Cal, and Harrison Wallace, the wide receiver for Ole Miss, who came by way of transfer from Penn State. And then number 3, I'm going to another one of South Carolina's opponents. Try to emphasize some South Carolina opponents in this one. But this is Johnny Williams IV, a left tackle for Missouri, formerly of West Virginia. Now, I talked about Trey Harris not walking through that door for Ole Miss. Ahmad Membu is not walking through that door for Missouri either. I mean, one of the best left tackles in college football last year. We saw what he did for Missouri. Now, Mizzou had some other issues that kind of kept them from reaching their potential during the season, but Membu was not one of those. A stalwart left tackle who became a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. With so much change on Missouri's offense, you have to be able to find a way to protect your new quarterback. Now, Bo Pribula, who is the quarterback transferring in from Penn State, showed a lot of promise in the small sample size that we saw from him. He played a lot of specialty snaps, a lot of certain packages where Pribula would come in and run the ball, very similar to Tim Tebow in 2006 for Florida when Chris Leak was the starter and Tebow came in on 3rd or 4th and short and oftentimes was getting a first down. But he's going to be a full-time starter this year, and he's going to need all the help he can get. Now, Missouri does have a talented group of receivers that are unproven. Guys like Marquise Johnson, Daniel Blood, guys that have good talent. They're highly rated recruits, but they're going to have to do it in a full-time spot here for the first time really in their careers. And what could be an offense's best friend with a lot of new faces? Well, a steady offensive line. In the left tackle position, maybe the most important. Johnny Williams showed some flashes. And if we want this, if Missouri wants this experiment with Pribula to work, he's got to look like he did in those flashes at West Virginia. Now, he didn't play a large number of snaps last year. Now, he did play a lot in the first game against Penn State at home, but he didn't play a lot until later in the year. But the grades are really good. Now, when it comes to offensive line grades, I like to lean on Pro Football Focus. They know exactly what more to look for than someone like myself. As long as you're not giving up a lot of sacks and a lot of pressures, you're doing pretty good. And Johnny Williams IV did not give up a ton of pressures when he was thrown in at that left tackle position at West Virginia last year. He has an 84.5 pass blocking grade per PFF. And the question is that good enough to translate? If he's able to step in and give you that 84.5 grade and make it look like that on the field and not give up a lot of pressures, that's going to free up Missouri's passing game. It's going to make them maybe better than we anticipate. Because right now I've kind of got Missouri in that 9 to 12 range. They're a mystery right now, and that game can be tricky for South Carolina, not because Missouri's just this juggernaut, but because it's a long trip. Missouri's been a hard place for the Gamecocks to win, especially with Eli Drinkwitz being the head coach for Missouri. And we finally lifted the Drinkwitz curse in Columbia this past year with that Rocket Sanders earthquake-inducing touchdown. But in order to make it a little bit of a winning streak against the Missouri Tigers, they're going to have to take advantage of the offensive line. And Johnny Williams, when he plays South Carolina, is going to have to face maybe Dylan Stewart, maybe Brian Thomas Jr., Desmond Umeozulu, Sean Murphy. He's going to see a lot of different faces and a lot of really talented edge rushers in the SEC, but specifically against South Carolina. He might not only be just an X factor for the South Carolina game, he can be an X factor for this Missouri team as they get into SEC play as well. Number 4, this was an easy one for me because when you looked at what plagued Georgia last year, really I think the thing that kept Georgia from being national championship good, and one of the reasons why they lost 2 games in the regular season, something that we haven't seen a lot from Kirby Smart coached Georgia teams since he won his first title, is that the wide receiving room was atrocious last year. So many drops. And those drops really stalled out the offense and limited what its ceiling was. Now, the running game at Georgia is always going to be good, and it's going to be good this year. I think Nate Frazier's a really good running back. I like what they have on the offensive line because that's just what Georgia does is they don't just recruit, they reload on the line of scrimmage. True for offensive line and defensive line. But you can't have drops on 3rd down and 6. You can't have drives stalled because the wide receivers can't make plays. So they went out in the transfer portal and grabbed one of the more physically impressive receivers available, and that was Texas A&M's Noah Thomas. Noah Thomas, very tall, lanky receiver, but he is great in those jump ball situations. He wins a ton of those 50-50 balls. Now, Thomas, in terms of like the 50-50 balls, he actually catches them at a 50% rate, right? I mean, that's when you look at some of the advanced stats, the 50-50 balls really are more like 30, 70, 40, 60 in favor of the defenders because college quarterbacks aren't as good. And sometimes those throws can be maybe a little off target. But Noah Thomas did catch 50% of his contested catches last year, and he's a lot more sure-handed than anybody on that Georgia team was last year. And with a decent sample size, too, he had 72 targets. That's a pretty solid sample size. And especially for an offense in Texas A&M that didn't love to throw the ball a ton, especially when Connor Wegman went down and Marcel Reed kind of took the starting spot, and he used his legs a lot in that offense. And, of course, Texas A&M, with the way they're built, with Colin Klein as the offensive coordinator, he was a running quarterback at Kansas State with a run-heavy offense. He's carried that with him as a play caller. So A&M last year was a lot more run-heavy, and they relied on a more old-school approach to move the football. But they still targeted Noah Thomas 72 times, and he only had 3 drops, never more than 1 in a game. So this could really be the difference for the Georgia Bulldogs from being a good offense with a great defense, with an offense that could keep them from winning games. Example, the Ole Miss game last year, they're only able to score 10 points on the road in Oxford. Or in the Notre Dame game where Notre Dame's defense just completely smothered them for 4 quarters and they could not move the ball at all. It could be the difference between another year like that where you don't fulfill your potential because you can't have a healthy offense and contain long drives. And it could be the difference between them contending for a national championship. Georgia's going to be a very popular pick in a couple of weeks in Atlanta in SEC Media Days as the team that's picked to win the SEC. One of the things I need to know is how much does this receiving group come along and how much can Noah Thomas actually help them? Number 5, LSU's Patrick Payton, an edge rusher from Florida State. And if you look at what LSU's done the last couple of years, it is highlighted by wasting great offenses. They completely wasted a Heisman season from Jaden Daniels, who had one of the more impressive passing and running seasons we've seen from a quarterback in a long time, because they couldn't stop a nosebleed. One of the worst defenses. An offense that puts up almost 50 points a game shouldn't just be 9-3, but they were. And that's why they fired the defensive coordinator. That's why they invest in over $2.5 million a year for Blake Baker to be the defensive coordinator and to be able to fix that defense. It was better last year solely by virtue of just not being 2023. You couldn't have been much worse. But they improved, but they were still giving up 23 points a game. And you look at what LSU did in the portal, I could pick any of the wide receivers they brought in as the most important transfer for a team like LSU. Berrien Brown, Nick Anderson. The offense is still loaded, but that's not been the problem under Brian Kelly the last couple of years. The problem is you can't stop anybody else's offense. So Patrick Payton as an edge rusher is a guy that's caught the attention of a lot of NFL scouts. A lot of mock drafts have Payton potentially as a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So that should be a plug and play, right? That should be the fix. Not quite. Not quite. Because there's one big red flag with Patrick Payton that has to be rectified in order for him to make this big impact for LSU. Because if LSU's got a really good defense, they have legit national title hopes. But the big thing with him, and I call this the big if alert, he had a missed tackle rate of over 28% last year. That's atrocious. He's whiffing on more than 1 out of every 4 tackle attempts. If that carries over from Florida State to LSU, we're going to see a same old story from LSU and a Brian Kelly coach Tigers team that we've seen the last 2 years. A great offense that can't stop anybody else because they can't tackle anybody. Tigers have a good linebacking core between Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins. Your linebackers only do so good if you can't tackle the quarterback. If Patrick Payton can continue to win on the line of scrimmage and seal the deal and tackle the other team's quarterback, he's going to give them a shot to try to maximize that potential. My final segment as a host of the postgame show coming up next. I just gave you the 5 most important non-quarterback transfers in the SEC, and I had an honorable mention, and he's a Gamecock. Now, this is one I had to think about a lot in terms of if I could pick one Gamecock defensive player to break out and have an incredible season that's a transfer that would absolutely elevate this team's ceiling, it's Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy for a couple reasons. One, he's in a position battle in that interior defensive line. I know they're still really high on guys like Monkel Goodwine and Nick Barrett, and there's a good chance those guys are the predominant interior D-line starters. But I think we're going to see a lot of Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy this year. But this is a guy that was a top 15 recruit in the country, was part of an incredible Texas A&M recruiting class, and is one of those guys where the talent is there. You just got to find a way to tap into it. But why this is important is by looking at the construct of the South Carolina defense. The strength, Dylan Stewart on the edge. You arguably have the best edge rusher in the SEC, one of the best edge rushers in America. You're going to wreak havoc on the opposing team's quarterback on a weekly basis, regardless of who you play, regardless of who the opposing offensive line is. You have a fantastic secondary. Jalen Kilgore, potential first-round pick. Judge Collier, a guy who really grew into his own, had a solid season last year. Peyton Williams stepped up in big moments when he was asked to because somebody missed because of injury or he had to come in for a play. He took advantage of that. He's grown a lot. And then you get Brandon Cisse from the transfer portal, one of the best defensive backs available from NC State, and you have a guy that can play multiple positions in that secondary. I don't worry about the South Carolina Gamecocks secondary at all going into next year. I don't worry about the pass rush at all going into next year. But can you stop the run? Those things are great. But if you don't have run stoppers, then teams can kind of circumvent that edge that you have on them, whether it be rushing the quarterback or having a really good secondary. You do that just by not passing the ball. If you can't stop the run and you're getting gashed for 5-6 yards a game or every game, then it's going to make things really difficult on you. A team can run against you and bleed clock and prolong drives, make your defense tired, make your edge rushers tired, make everybody on the field more tired. And one of the reasons why South Carolina was so successful last year was the production from Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders on the interior. Those guys are in the NFL now. They were elite run stoppers. No one simply just ran the ball on South Carolina. And I remember going into the Texas A&M game, that was one of the biggest questions I had going into it was, can you stop A&M's running game? They're running, I guess the running back room, really talented. The run blocking on the offensive line, one of the best in the country. They're going to run the ball. They're going to milk clock. Can you stop them? And if A&M was able to do that, we probably would have had a different result. But that never materialized. The South Carolina defensive line really snuffed the run in that game, helped them steal that one. Now, they struggled in the Missouri game, but for a lot of times this year, the Gamecocks were hard to run on. If Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy can reach the potential that he had coming out of high school and be a really good run stopper, we can see this being a top 20 defense. Again, definitely. And if this is a top 20 defense, given all that you have returning on offense, and Lenora Sellers is Lenora Sellers, then we are talking about South Carolina as a potential college football playoff team. So I think that makes Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy one of the most important non-quarterback transfers in the SEC this season. That's all I have for today's show. Before we hit the music and I get pushed out of here, I want to go ahead and reiterate, no show tomorrow, no show on Friday for the 4th of July. And then starting Monday, here on the game, a completely different show lineup. Not completely. I like to think of this as like a 3-team trade in basketball, right? I have been traded to the early game. Bill Gunner has been traded to the halftime show. So he'll be hanging out with Tyler Head from noon until 3. And then where you've normally heard me here in this spot from 3 to 6 with Jay Phillips. Still have Jay Phillips. But Terry Ford's going to slide into this chair, and they're going to have a little bit of an old halftime show reunion. Now, they've done a show before. They're no strangers to each other. So that's kind of the mixed show lineup right there. Hopefully everybody has a fantastic 4th of July because I'm not going to be able to see you and talk to you again until Monday. Enjoy all the food. I'm going to enjoy the most underrated 4th of July food, which is absolutely potato salad. My man KT from Lexington agrees with me. Billy from Blythewood's going to enjoy his ice-cold watermelon. Everybody, enjoy their 4th of July weekend. And most importantly, be safe. I have to give this disclaimer every year on the last show before the 4th of July. Fireworks are fun. I love playing with bottle rockets and Roman candles more than anybody. But the goal for everybody when you hear the new show lineup on Monday is that you can listen from whether it be your car, your office, your home, wherever you normally listen to the game, you're listening with all the fingers and toes that you went into the weekend with. So let's play with fireworks responsibly and don't do it too late at night because I get sleepy and I can get grumpy. Looking forward to joining the early game with Preston Thorne and Jen Jensen starting on Monday. Everybody enjoy the holiday. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. Hope you guys can join me in the mornings as well. Talk to you again on Monday morning.